So let's first briefly talk about the reality that we're all living in from working at home. And I know we're all very much aware of this. You might have watched maybe two or three other webinars that mention the reality of what's happening today, and we're all aware of it. You know, you're working at home, you got lots going on, you might have your kids around you, and you're wondering, what am I going to do? For some organizations, they are not or were not prepared at all for what was happening or what is to come in the coming weeks and months, depending on how long this current COVID-19 situation lasts. You have workers that just need to figure out how to work effectively, and they may not have the right technology to do so. One thing that's interesting to note is a New York Times article that I read about a month or so ago from someone named Jason Fried, who owns his own company. He wrote this book called Remote, and he has a company, his company, sorry, has all these employees that work just remotely from home. They don't have any single office. And this includes before this crisis happened and now. And here's a couple interesting quotes. First, he says that it's best for you and your team to choose a set of versatile tools rather than a variety of single taskers. So having that set of tools that does a lot of what you need, instead of choosing 4 or 5 tools to do so. It's really key that you ensure that everyone also uses the same tools. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how Microsoft Teams can be that single tool for you to effectively work remotely and to enable your customers to do so as well. We conducted a survey here at Ribbon in 2019 to really look at how companies have responded, at least previously, to how remote working can work for them and what they have done about it. And we surveyed 4,800 people from approximately 23 countries. And our first question was, what percentage of your employees work remotely? And again, this was last year. This was not during this current situation here in the year 2020. 35% said that none of their employees work remotely. And then about less than 25% of their employees, that was about 31% of our respondents. Imagine what the answers would be today. It'd be very different. And then we additionally asked about what collaboration tools does your company use? And this was a question in which the person answering could pick as many tools as they wanted to. They could have picked 3, 4, or 5 of them. And you can see Skype for Business was the highest and Microsoft Teams was the second highest. And the biggest note from this is that the average or mean number of collaboration tools that individuals chose was 3. That's a lot of tools to do mostly the same thing. And so what we want to do here is show you how you can move to Microsoft Teams, even virtually, and help your customers make that transition effectively. And let's just talk a little bit more about Teams by the numbers. More than 500,000 organizations use Microsoft Teams, and more than 91% of the Fortune 100 companies use it as well. There's a lot of demand and a lot to be said about Microsoft Teams. I use it every day. It's my favorite platform to use. I'm sure most of you use it as well. Today, we're going to talk very specifically about having calling through Microsoft Teams, as well as how to enable contact center agents and other organizations to transition their telephony to Microsoft Teams. Just another note here about the traction. There's now 44 million active daily users, most likely a lot more than that today. You can see how it's outgrown Slack. So let's look just another slide quickly on how people and organizations have actually gone to Microsoft Teams and how many of them have actually made the transition. This is really good information for yourself as partners or service providers to understand, to see where your customers are on this journey. And based on this first chart here that asks, what are your company's plans regarding Microsoft Teams? It looks like most of the larger companies have deploying, or are planning a transition, which is very different from very small organizations that aren't really aware of what's happening. And then another question that was very interesting to see the results was, how will your company deploy Microsoft Teams? The 3 choices were doing it with a Microsoft calling plan, doing it with their own calling plan that they have with their existing service provider, with their trunks, their SIP trunks going through that service provider. And the third one, they're not sure. And overwhelmingly, a majority of them said that yes, that they will use direct routing, which is another term of the service that Microsoft provides to allow companies to connect to their service provider contract, to their existing service provider trunks. And a lot of people have told us in person, while I've been at these Microsoft Ignite events that were happening and other events, that they do plan on ultimately going fully to Microsoft for calling, but they still needed to transition step by step. They did not want to make that transition overnight. And that's what this data very much suggests. So if you're one of the people in that 79% ballpark saying, I need to consider my current calling plan and use that with Microsoft Teams for calling, then how can I do so? Well, Microsoft advises, actually, they require that in order to do that, that an SBC is required. And that means that that SBC can be on-premise, it can be in the cloud, and that allows you to really connect directly your calling to Microsoft Teams. That's 87%. That also adds up the people that said that they would still want to do a Microsoft calling plan even now, but in the next 6 to 12 months, they need to have something available to keep their existing calling in Microsoft Teams. And with Ribbon, you can do so very easily. We're one of just a few companies that are certified for Microsoft Teams Direct Routing. And the reasons to do Teams Direct Routing are many. One of them is the Microsoft Phone System Calling Plan costs might not meet the enterprise's budget, and it may not be available in every enterprise location and country that you have. Also, you may be in the middle of an existing contract, and it's not worth breaking that contract. And then you may have existing PBX analog devices. We can easily interwork with that, including if you have this deployed in the cloud. And what we'll talk a little bit more about now is our simple yet effective cases for deploying Teams Direct Routing with Ribbon. And what you see here is a couple scenarios for partners to do so. On the left, you have our Edgemark Intelligent Edge, which is responsible for ensuring that the edge is connected, and we can do routing and enablement of your connection so that you have that connection to your PSTN and to your PBX. And that goes out to the service provider cloud. You have it connected to your Microsoft Teams, of course, and this can be all deployed in Microsoft Azure. On the right is another platform called our Intelligent Edge 6000 or Edgemark 6000. And what that is that enables you to connect all your communications with a backup with LTE or 5G in case your connection goes down. So in this remote working environment, you may have a lot of demand on your network. And if the network goes down, you still have LTE and 5G as a backup on it so that you can connect and easily bring in your connections and continue to enable business continuity. And this is all from our SBC SUI Lite, which is assured and certified for Microsoft Azure. And then just a couple more cases from the carrier perspective. I want to focus particularly on the left side because for carriers who are looking to deploy direct routing, they may be considering a lot of different scenarios, but they're not sure where to start. One thing that's really impressive about our SBC SUI Lite is that it can be deployed in the Microsoft Azure cloud in just under 5 to 10 minutes, which is amazing. And this is with our newest release. What does that mean for you, the service provider or the carrier? It means that you can easily test out SUI Lite on your own and deploy it and see how it works. We know it'll work great, and you'll be able to connect your existing devices and connect all of your networks from all your branch offices into Microsoft Teams to enable that phone calling through the platform. And touching base to what I talked about before, you want to have that single calling and device mechanism or collaboration tool for you to work effectively as a company. And we can easily help you do so with our solutions. And now we'll have Declan Doyle, part of the go-to-market team at Poly, talk about how Poly enables remote working. Take it away, Declan.
Thank you, John, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I want to change gear really and talk about experience and about what experience you need your workers to have when they're working from home. And specifically, because we're talking primarily about contact center here and contact center along with Teams, about those intensive voice users. And that's the phrase I use to talk about those people who use their voice all day, every day. Your typical enterprise worker, such as ourselves, in a normal situation, you're talking an average 2-3 hours a day, continuously, if you added up all your different calls. People who are using their voice for a living are talking over 8 hours a day, all day, every day. And if they're going to be working remote, there's some very significant considerations that you want to cater for. Yes, so first question you could say is why bother? I mean, the general consensus was that, well, look, voice is going to be deprecating in kind of customer interactions. For customer experience, voice, is being augmented or replaced by other channels, by AI, by bots, by some level of automation. And if you look at a graph like this, you'd probably agree, except this graph does not tell the full picture, because What's actually happening is the number of channels and the number of interactions is exploding. So although voice is a smaller part, it's a smaller part of a much, much bigger pie. The reality is voice is actually growing, which sounds kind of counterintuitive if we've all these other very clever and insightful automated tools to help us. Why would that be the case? Well, the reality is self-service is great, but over half, 55% of self-service interactions end up escalating to voice. And that happens for many reasons. Sometimes the system is not particularly well planned, or sometimes people are in a time crunch, or sometimes it's complex, or sometimes they're not getting what they want. And in one reason or another, and unfortunately at this very difficult time, increasingly, people are in a situation where they need help and they need it quickly. It's not like people that we don't these days all try to self-serve to some degree. And certainly 60% of consumers do that. But the reality is, when there's a time crunch on, or when people are stressed, or when people are anxious, or when people are frustrated, or when people are angry, or when people are distressed, or when they're in a hurry, 98, almost 100% of people call in order to get the situation resolved. And it's very simple. Why? Because speaking to somebody is the easiest way to explain the situation, and it's the quickest way to get things resolved. So, I mean, why wouldn't you? And so voice is not going away. Voice now is just getting repositioned in your customer experience journey. It's not the initiation point. It's become the priority line. It's become the escalation. It's become the final, I suppose, journey on your brand to save your brand with regard to customer experience and your customers. They've tried everything else and now they need to speak to somebody. And that's having a direct knock-on effect on the profile and type of people who an organization now need to hold and own that voice channel. Back in the day, you know, if your company had a couple of multi-channels, maybe a bit of Twitter and maybe email and then voice, people who work in the industry had to follow scripts and, get people off the line as quick as possible and move on and kind of move on to the next call. That's not the case anymore. Now, because voice is seen as the escalation and as the priority line, they need people who are well trained, people who have high emotional intelligence, people who have high academic intelligence, people who've got a lot of experience, people who are warm, people who can help. And they become the owners of your brand. So that's a very different type of person than was the perception for a contact center in the past. And, that sort of person, quite apart before we had this crisis, this sort of working environment was not something that drew the high profile, high quality person that you needed to be your voice channel. And let's face it, in these days, social distancing is not possible in this scenario. But a lot of people, the best people didn't want to be stuck in traffic or didn't want to have to move and work in a building with a lot of people. And so organizations in this industry had resisted for many years change. But in the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen a very significant growth in people wanting to work remotely and work flexibly in their home, where it's with their work-life balance. And there's a bigger agenda, perhaps one that will last much longer than this current crisis, and that is the green agenda. Because of course, organizations and governments are looking around the world and saying, how do we cut down on our emissions? And if people don't have to drive and people don't have to sit on freeways and people don't have to sit on buses and trains, then that is an immediate impact. And we're seeing it. I live in Dublin, as John mentioned, and in the news today already our government is articulating about the amount of people that they want to have work remotely post COVID-19. So it's certainly not a trend that's going away, but it doesn't mean that it's easy for business. Because when you talk about taking remote workers, but particularly you're talking about those intensive voice workers, those contact center workers, it's very scary. You look and see a lot of risk. You have to look at considerations around security and data integrity, of course, across your network and with your applications. You need it to be stable and reliable wherever people are. I mean, we're all running off consumer broadband right now, and we need that to work. And the platforms to be stable. And of course, you need to ensure, and perhaps the most difficult part is how do you ensure that people are productive when they're not physically sitting in front of you. Now, we're looking in Poly. For those who don't know, Poly is in fact an amalgamation of two very famous companies, Plantronics and Polycom. And in Plantronics, we had actually gone flexible working in 2008, 2009, and we learned a lot along the way. And of course, our legacy in Plantronics is, we've been working with remote workers for a very, very long time, because it was in fact Plantronics who delivered the audio solutions for the Apollo program that allowed Neil Armstrong to communicate from the moon way back in 1969, which is something obviously that we're very proud as a corporate heritage, and something, here we are again, enabling remote workers. And you know, this is of course the nirvana. You have your workers, you have your intensive voice workers working at home. But the reality, of course, particularly these days when people are having to do it in a hurry, not so easy. It's very easy for remote working to go wrong if organizations don't take the right considerations as much as they can in advance. And that's what we did when we went on the journey. And we summarized it in three very straightforward perspectives. And really these represent three legs of a stool. And like any stool, you take a leg away and you have a fail. And you know, rather than trying to just worry about security, which of course is important, it was around finding ways of having people work where and when they were most productive, cost effective, and environmentally green, and of course happy too. And we called it the three Bs. And those three Bs were bricks, bytes, and behavior. To summarize holistically what an organization needs to do when approaching flexible and remote working. The bricks refers to the workspace. When it's in your building, you can control it. But how suitable is the workspace of your staff member when they're not at home, or when they're not in the office, I beg your pardon? And we had to do a suitability study of each individual's workspace, and they had to do it in order to ensure it was fit for purpose. Now that's really important in contact center, because people are going to be there for a long time and they can't afford any form of interruption. And if your work profile is fairly young, a lot of those people share workspaces. So that it's really important to do that survey of their workspace and suitability of their space. The bytes is straightforward, and I think everybody in this line is most comfortable discussing ensuring you have the robustness, reliability, scalability, securability, and deliverability of your application where and when it's needed. The third one is the trickiest one of all. You know, when we looked at other organizations looking to migrate, the number one barrier to adoption of flexible and remote policies was management worrying about how to manage remotely. And again, it simply is, it's an evolution. It's not automatically easy, but moving from task to goal orientation, it certainly and absolutely can be done, and the benefits are manifest. But in terms of time, I'll move on, because here we are talking about Microsoft Teams, which we in Poly use as well, and it's a very, very powerful platform. But as a global leader in collaboration, it's really important that when people are looking for the right experience, that they use those devices that are certified. And with our portfolio of both audio and video and collaboration solutions, the good news is we've got the broadest certified for Teams portfolio in the world, from personal devices, both wired and of course wireless, including the one I'm using now, into shared collaboration devices for conferencing and for video, both in terms of personal video, huddle room video, when hopefully that comes back soon, and right up into Teams certified rooms. John mentioned earlier on that the average user is using up to 3 platforms to collaborate. So although Teams is powerful, your organizations need to be able to play nice with other platforms and seamlessly switch between them. And that's where our video interoperability services come into play, to allow all your platforms so that you can collaborate with your customers as well as internally, seamlessly and elegantly. All of that is limited if you don't have the appropriate management tools in place, and indeed if you don't deploy the correct pre and post implementation services to ensure you get success out of the box. So that's what Poly does specifically in Teams, but that's an awful lot of hardware. And you know, for organizations, first and foremost, they can look and go, wow, you know, where do we even start? What's the right device for me? So what we did inside Poly, we did extensive global research to try and help our customers to a degree choose the right devices for their people. And we looked on a global basis, comprehensive research, looking and defining personas within the enterprise, and that's what we did. And there's 7 personas that we've identified, and we looked very deep dive in each of them around their work locations, our work location, and their kind of communication needs, their pain points, and really to help define what is the right devices. The sharp-eyed amongst you will do the maths and realize, hold on, there's 91% there, where's the other 9? Turns out there's 9% of people in the enterprise globally who do not have collaboration communication as part of their role, and therefore they're not included. And we have a huge amount of background research and information on this to help you. Please let us know, and we'll do our very best to help you self-serve and yourself and your customers identify from a humanistic perspective what people they are, and therefore what technology is most appropriate for them. And because we've seen it again and again, there is a direct link between the efforts an organization takes to profile their users and their needs with the likelihood of adoption and success. It's a straight line connecting one to the other. It's been proven again and again that if organizations go that final step and that final part of the network, which is the user, and ensure they deliver the experience with a device that the user wants to use, they're going to get success in adoption and implementation. But of course, we are talking here about intensive voice and contact center workers. They have different needs. And again, we're very best in order to deliver personas appropriate for intensive voice users, because again, their needs are different from the typical enterprise or UC worker. But look, don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. You can go to that web address or just Google Poly Product Finder. Look at yourself, look at your customers, put in the information, do it on your mobile phone, and see if indeed it helps you arrive at maybe a subset of products that are most appropriate for the needs of a particular individual or profile or persona within your organization. So there are significant upsides to this. That if you succeed in migrating your workforce to flexible working and you cover the 3 Bs, you get benefits around flexibility, work-life balance, which makes people happier. The green agenda is achieved and people spend less time going from A to B. You have a more robust business, as we're all experiencing right now. If you can have people work from wherever they are, you get a huge flexibility on behalf of your workers, because you can employ people who don't fit the 9 to 5 with great skills and all of the things we mentioned about the super agent, but they can't come into an office at a fixed time, but they can come in at other times, and that gives you a greater coverage as well. The more you facilitate how people want to live, the more likely you are to encourage less churn. And when you need those high empathic people I mentioned and those higher skilled people, then that really matters. The reduced cost. Property optimization is the #1 empirical reason businesses move to flexible working. Because if your people aren't there, you don't need a building as big as it is, or indeed a building at all. And again, we're seeing that now. I'm sure your social media, like mine, is full of examples of CIOs and facilities now talking about whether they'll actually need the real estate that they currently have. But finally, you get that uplift in morale. The single biggest outcome of Poly migrating to flexible working was the phenomenon of overworking, whereby it was evident that people were doing more from home than they were doing in the office. They were doing it at different times, but they're contributing more. And in some respects, almost had to dial that back a little. And there's lots of reasons why people did it, but morale was a big part of that. So speaking as a brand in this space with Teams and with Contact Center, we span both, because we do both. We have by far and away the largest endpoint portfolio, covering everything from individual video and audio right up to large scale collaboration, but by way of huddle rooms as well. We're in this business a very, very long time, and we continue to innovate, but our brands are extremely well established, and now I'm sitting under the umbrella of Poly. And of course, we're the biggest player, which means we've significant global expertise, infrastructure, and the post-sales support for you and indeed your customers. And with that, I will hand back to John.
Thank you very much. And I'll now send it over to Giovanni Niedu from Mida Solutions, who will talk about what their solutions do from a contact center and voice perspective. Giovanni, see if you can move the slides.
It looks like it doesn't work again.
Let me try.
Oh, okay, it goes. Okay, thank you very much, John, and good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Let me just spend a couple of minutes to introduce Mida Solutions. We are a company based in Italy, in Padua. You see a wonderful view of a part of our city here. Mida was founded back in 2004 by a team of engineers with a wide and long-standing experience in telecommunications. And we continue to grow on that experience and specializing in unified communications and professional communications. We work mainly through partnerships. You see here some of our partners around the globe. And of course, we are partner with Ribbon and Poly, who are sharing this webinar with us today. So Let me just take the move from what John and Declan already said before and talk a little bit about teams and adoptions in these days. So we've seen it. Team is from a technical perspective is very appealing to a lot of customers, a lot of enterprises, especially to small and medium businesses because of its being a fully cloud solution, so easy to implement. Because of the fact that it leverages on the Microsoft install base. All of us, I think, have to do with something from Microsoft, be it Word for our documents or PowerPoint for our presentations. And of course, it gets easy just to add a new tool to our Microsoft set of tools. Teams is also tightly integrated with the Microsoft productivity tools. A lot of back-end applications like Dynamics, if you want CRM, and other tools, AI tools, and so on. Pricing model, yes, that's another thing which appeals a lot to companies. There's a strong encouragement from Microsoft to work with third-party companies like Mida, for example, to develop applications that will go into the Microsoft catalog, into the Microsoft ecosystem, and adopt pricing models like software as a service. Very, very attractive for enterprises. You pay based on what you actually consume of an application. And finally, let's say with Microsoft Teams, they have really joined and put in synergy, let's say, the experience that most of the Skype for Business users had when using it as a collaboration tool internal to the company, with the possibility to also get outside of the company, integrate deeply with the communications over the PSTN, build things like contact centers, for example, in a very effective way, host conference calls, host webinars, why not? So a real merge of the unified communication part on one hand and the cooperation and collaboration part on the other end. Now, come to our days and the experience that everybody over the world is living, forced by COVID-19. A lot of companies, thousands of companies, have been forced to move from their classical office-based model to a completely or almost completely home office model. And it was not, they didn't have a choice, really. It was a matter of do it or stop working, get out of the business, because we are not allowed to go to the office anymore. And so clearly, cloud solutions have played a very, very relevant role in this transition. And John told us about the huge increase in the adoption and in the use of Microsoft Teams from the end of 2019 to these days, fundamentally doubled the usage from November 19 to today. And the other relevant point, I think, the third one I have listed here, the adoption has been very quick. In the past, changing your way of working or changing your tool was never easy. You would have to ask the end customers to evaluate between different options, and of course, they would say, "Well, why changing? I feel comfortable with what I have today. No reason to move away from that." And also, think about IT managers, for example, huge concerns about security. Now, all this has been shrunk from possibly a process that would took weeks or months into a process that took really days or a week, because there was no other choice. Again, you had to go that way. in order to continue working. And as Declan was saying before, this is not going to end. When this emergency will be over and we will all be back to our normal lives, well, a lot of managers, a lot of CEOs, COOs have understood and have verified really that working from home has benefits. So it will not be 100% everybody back in the office. It will not be 100% everybody working from home, but definitely an increased percentage of workforce will continue working from home when all this will be over. Now, let's talk about one of the tools that has become very important these days, contact center, a way to keep continuity and touch with your customers. Now, if you have to move all of a sudden between a legacy situation where you have your legacy PBX into a cloud world, well, you have problems. You're going to hit problems. First of all, your legacy PBX is very well integrated with your back office, with your internal processes, with your customer care and call center applications. But then, all of a sudden, you try to put all this into the Microsoft Teams cloud, and part of it works perfectly. You know, the cooperation internal, you have the Teams clients, but part of it really is not as developed as it used to be in the legacy world, in the old PBX applications. So that there's not such a seamless integration between all this, the left-hand part, with your customer backend processes and so on. And that's where we in Mida can help. We can provide call and contact center applications. We have a wide experience in integrating between the communication parts, the PBX, and the backend process, be it the CRM or be other processes in the company. Now, let's say a quick perspective, a few slides about what we see that's still missing in Microsoft Teams from a unified communication point of view, from a vendor of call and contact center applications. So starting from the end user, so from what Teams provides in terms of client to pick up calls and manage calls. Yeah, you can use the native Teams client. However, functionalities are a little bit limited. You have some choice in terms of answering calls, putting them on hold, transferring calls perhaps, but you are missing a little bit the let's say advanced functionalities like camping a call on another agent or on a colleague, waiting for him to become free, or agent-related functionalities like wrap-up time when the call is over and they need to do some admin work to complete and take notes about the call itself. Directory integration can be improved, definitely, not very well executed perhaps at the Teams level. And from a perspective of a software developer and vendor as we're still struggling with APIs from Microsoft that would allow us to build a completely standalone client to interwork with the Teams infrastructure. Now moving to, let's say, the native call center functionalities of Teams. Teams have some native queuing capabilities. Again, good, possibly not good enough for people with advanced needs. For example, basic call distribution algorithms only available. There's no skills-based or idle-based algorithm for managing the calls. When a service or a queue gets into a critical status, the commonly used name is queue overflow status. Too many calls arriving, too few agents able to deal with those calls. So what can you do? Options in Microsoft Teams are limited. You can redirect to another Teams client, you can redirect to another queue. Nothing more than that. You can't redirect to a mobile number, for example, things like that. Management of service opening and closing time. Yeah, you can do that. Not exactly linear, a little bit cumbersome perhaps. Also talking about options for keeping the customers, let's say, happy while they're waiting. Yeah, you can have a welcome message at the beginning. You can have music on while they're kept on hold. There's no other possibility. It's quite common in the contact center business, let's say, to have additional things like diversified messages during the waiting time, for example, or the possibility to know the position in the queue, things like that. IVRs, they do have an IVR, could be more flexible from the end user point of view, from the way you can structure the tree and the choices. And again, as for the client, there is still a lack of APIs for software developers to build and develop applications external to Microsoft, let's say, that would be able to manage a native Teams queue and to understand the status, to monitor the queue and take action if anything goes wrong. So what do we propose? We have fundamentally three main products which are fully integrated with Microsoft Teams. The first and most important is the Cloud Contact Center, the C-Cube. It's a complete solution that's fully integrated with Microsoft Teams and also keeps compatibility with Skype for Business. We understand and we know that the move from Skype for Business into Teams is not something that happens, one day for another. It takes time. So, we want to make sure that customers that are in between can continue to use their Skype for Business clients, perhaps, while gradually moving to the new Teams platform. Mida Attendant. It said here, a unique console that talks through Teams. It means really integrated with the Teams client and providing the additional capabilities that as I said before, are still missing. And finally, a recorder, a voice recorder, which is sometimes needed on a call center environment, either for legal reasons or for internal policies of the company. Now, main functionality of the Cloud Contact Center, very quick to install. We understand time is a premium in these days, so everything that takes days or weeks to install is simply not going to work. It integrates with the existing tools or the backend processes for the customer, like CRMs, for example. You see here Dynamics or Salesforce, industrial level security layer, reporting and analytics to understand and report on how the contact center is going. Very attractive pricing. We can have either classical licenses or pay-per-use, pay-as-you-grow licenses, which we try to suit to the need of the customer. And finally, very intuitive, very let's say studied user interface, 100% web-based to make things easier for everybody. Okay, sorry, I went a bit too fast. Attendant console, we have actually two flavors. I will show them in a minute. One is, let's say, a legacy classical attendant console with support for legacy PBX, and the other one the one which is fully integrated with Teams. Actually, it's been announced the beginning of the month and will be soon widely available for everybody. Possibility to integrate with CRMs and also to integrate fully with a corporate directory. I was saying before, the integration between the Teams client and the directory is perhaps not as good as it could be. Plus all the smart tools that I was mentioning before: call parking, call camping, possibility to transfer, and so on, and the status of the agents. So this is the look and feel of the, let's say, legacy attendant console for the legacy PBX. You see it's a web-based window application. You have possibility to see the incoming calls, interact with the incoming calls using mouse or shortcuts, have a full integrated corporate directory, and typical tools that make this good environment for a professional call center agent. From the Teams point of view, here is the look and feel. As you see, it's just an application that plugs into the Teams client. You can see, again, incoming calls, main KPIs, full directory of your contacts, of your colleagues, and full information about them. As well, a supervisor console integrated in Teams for people who need to manage the day by day, minute by minute actually operations of a call center with real-time indicators and all the visibility on the services and queues under their control. Finally, Mida Recorder. We operate actually in many fields with this recorder. Enterprise is one, but we also operate in the transportation and critical communication field. So it's very flexible, adaptable to many different interfaces, including SIPREC, which is typically supported by SBCs and other interfaces. Quickly to set up, can be integrated with blockchain for third-party validation of the recorded calls. And finally, some conclusive notes. So what we are providing for remote workers is a solution which is basically a seatless solution. You can use it wherever you are, whether you are in the office, whether you are at home, and you get the same use and feel, look and feel. Very quickly to and easy to set up. Actually, all our applications are available in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. You can download them and install them, and there are also free trials for some time to let you evaluate the solution. Web-based GUI, so no need to install dedicated clients. Just have a browser and off you go. And finally, easy integration with backend office applications. So that's it for me. This is a link to our website where you can have more information about our products. And having said this, leave the floor back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. Really pleased to see what your company has brought to the table here in terms of effective Microsoft Teams solutions. And I'm just going to go to the next slide, which will actually link to that page that Giovanni just mentioned. Here at Ribbon, as well as Polly and Mida, we've combined to create a solution offer for you to start taking advantage of Microsoft Teams solutions. And it doesn't have to involve someone in person going on site. It's all from the cloud. It's interop tested and certified by Microsoft. Very easy to purchase and deploy. So if you have an inquiry about this or want to have a meeting with us, then all you'll do is you'll go to this link, which I will include in the email that has the webinar replay and the slide deck, which I'll send within 1 or 2 business days from today. And what this will have in this link is a simple form for you to fill out so that you can just easily get in contact with us and have an inquiry, have a discussion about our solutions that you learned about in today's webinar. If you want to already go and fill out the form right now, then it's just simply go.midasolutions.com/remote work-teams. But again, that link will be available within the email. And just to make it easier for everyone, I'm actually going to put it in the chat window right now. So you should see it on your chat window on your platform. And while you all receive that, let me take a quick look at the questions here. Thanks everyone for submitting questions. Looks like there were a couple questions that were addressed. And if you have any additional questions in general, then please feel free to send an email to us. You'll have my email address, which is jryan@rbbn.com. So you will receive the email from me with the webinar replay, the slides, and the link to the solution offer page. So if you have any questions directly to us that you want to submit, please reply to that email. Or you can fill out the solution offer form, which has the information needed, as well as a quick way for you to book a meeting with us and really get started on this journey to help really enable you to enable your customers and your partners to deploy Microsoft Teams securely, remotely via the cloud. And with that, we'll finish things up for our webinar. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to attend. We really appreciate it. And thank you to Giovanni and Declan for presenting. And we'll close things off here. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, John. Take care.
Thank you very much, John.